Hi guys, in this video we're going to have a look at another topic which I think will be relevant to many students who are planning their internal assessments. So a lot of people want to create programs which communicate with internet websites and collect data from those websites in their application. And the example that we're going to have a look at today is an application which uses live exchange rate information for different currencies. So if you want to use information from a website, obviously the first task you have to do is to pick the website that you're going to use. Now the website that we're going to look at is this site, CoinGecko, which is a cryptocurrency focused website, and it provides exchange rates for different currencies. Now when you normally go to a website, what you're seeing is a web page which is made up of HTML code and CSS and JavaScript. And you can see that by just right-clicking on a page and then go to View Page Source. And for example, this page is made up of all of this stuff. And obviously, if we want to collect information about currency exchange rates, then all of this stuff is actually just rubbish to us. We don't care about it. And we certainly don't want to have to read all of this into our program and then try to filter out the things which are really important to us. Fortunately, some websites like CoinGecko provide the information in another format. What we're talking about here is something called an API, which is an adaptive programmable interface. I think that's what it stands for. I'm actually going to have to check. But the basic idea of an API is that it is an interface which is not designed for humans to look at, but which is designed so that programs can communicate with other programs and request services from other programs. So in the case of CoinGecko, it provides an API which can deliver data to you using a format called JSON. And this website is actually very user-friendly in the way that it shows you all of the different methods that you can access within the API. So these are all of the different things that it can do for you, all of the different types of information it can provide. The one that we're interested in is the exchange rates information. And if you click on the Get button, then it will provide you with more information. What is really relevant to us is this request URL here. So this is a URL which we can copy. And if you open it in your browser and paste the URL in, you'll see that just accessing that URL returns a bunch of the information that we want in a format which is effectively plain text. So the structure of this plain text is actually conforming to a standard which is called JSON. And JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And it's just a very simple format which makes it convenient to exchange data between programs. So what we're going to do in our app is to read in this data, and then we're going to use a library in order to break down this information in the JSON format, and then we're going to use the tools which the library provides to get the information that we want and to display it in our app. Okay, so that's all of the theory. Let's have a look at the practice now and how we'd actually make this happen. So I'm going to go back to Eclipse, and again I'm going to start off with a completely new project. Let's call this Converter. Okay, and I'm going to use Window Builder to create a simple user interface. I don't want to focus too much on the user interface in this project because that's not really what's important here, but I'll create a main window. And then in the main window, I'm going to have a box for the exchange rate. So let's have a label first of all. Oh, sorry, absolute layout first of all. And then I'll just create a label. So let's put US dollar on this one. Now, obviously, feel free to do any currency you like. And then I'm going to have another label which tells us the Bitcoin exchange rate. Okay, now I want to display these as numbers, I think actually I'll use a J label. I was going to use a J spinner, but no, I'm going to use a J label because I don't want the numbers to be editable. So if I just pull out that J label. Now, if I was doing this program more seriously, I might well use a J spinner and make the numbers editable so that you could type in different values and then see them converted to different exchange rates, but that's not really a priority here. Okay, and remember to assign meaningful variable names when you create controls. So I'm going to call this the USD label. And then if I copy and paste that underneath, and let's call this the BTC label. So BTC means Bitcoin. Okay, so like I said, we're going to have a really simple user interface here. I don't want to focus on the user interface aspects. There will be other lessons when we do so, but in this case we're just going to keep the user interface very simple. Now I'll also have a button to update the information. Now later on we'll have a look at how we can update that information automatically at time intervals, but right now we'll just have a button to do that. Okay, and there's our user interface. Now the next thing, I'll just give the window a title. Okay, so the next thing is that we need to actually handle the program code to access the website and to read in the data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all of that program code in a new class, okay, because I don't want to mix up my user interface class with the other elements of my program. And let's call this converter. Now, the first step in the currency converter is that we need to access this web address and read the information from the web address, and since that's text, it's going to be read into a string. So let's have a look at how we do that task first of all. Now, rather than writing the web address directly into the program, I'm going to define it above as a string. So this is a website called CoinGecko, so let's put that as the variable name. Okay, and then I'm going to write a method called, actually I'll write this as the constructor. Okay, so in the constructor I'm going to access CoinGecko and I'm going to read in the exchange rate information. Now, if you want to read from a website, the first thing that you have to do is to create a URL for that website. So obviously this is the URL, but at the moment it's just stored as a string. So to turn that into a URL, I use the Java type URL. Oh, sorry, capital letters there. And then obviously import. And this has created a URL from this text URL up here. Now you'll notice that it's underlined in red, and that's because when we create a URL there is the possibility to have an error. And that error could occur because the URL might not actually be valid. Okay, now in our program we know that is a valid URL, but obviously Java can't know that for sure. So when you get this kind of situation, and we have talked about this occurring a little bit before, what I recommend is that you hover over the error, choose surround with try and catch, and this will create a try catch block, which basically means that we're going to try to do the things in the first half, and then if there's an error then we're going to do the things in the second half. So in the second half, what I recommend you do is just write throw new runtime exception E. And this means that if there is an error, then we will allow our program to crash. There are times when you might want to handle the error in a different way, but in general, I think we should not expect errors to occur in our program, and if errors do occur, then crashing is actually a good solution. We want to provide an error report, and then we want to use that to try to debug our program. Okay, so this is the line which we've written so far, which converts the CoinGecko text string into a URL. Now the next thing we have to do is to convert the URL into an input stream. So an input stream is a way that we can read data. Okay, so I'm going to write input stream. Now you will have seen input stream before when we read data from files. Okay, when we were reading in images and things like that, we used input stream. This time we're using input stream to read data from a web address. So to do that, I write URL dot and then open stream, and I need to import input stream. Now again, that could create an error. Now the reason this is underlined, even though it's in a try and catch block, is because it's a different type of error than the error here. So again, I'm going to be a little bit cheeky. This is not necessarily the most perfect way to do this, but what I'm going to do is just delete the malformed URL exception and just put exception. And basically that means that whatever the error is, I don't care about it. Just if it actually happens, then report it to me, but I don't care about it right now. Okay, so we've now got two lines. First of all, we made the URL for the web address, and then we create an input stream from the web address which allows us to read data. Okay, now the next thing that we have to do is to read in the JSON data. And in order to do that, you need to have a library installed. So Java doesn't have the capability to read JSON data built into it. However, there are lots of good Java libraries which you can add to your program in order to do that. The one that I'm going to recommend here is called Jakarta JSON. And if you drag and drop that onto your Eclipse project, I'm going to put it into the source folder and then choose copy files. Now once it's in your project, in order to make use of it, you have to right click on it and go to build path and then add to build path. Now I'll make sure that Jakarta JSON file is available for you because it can be a little bit tricky to find on the web if you don't know where to look. Okay, so once you've got the reference library, now we're ready to use some of the features of JSON processing. So in this case, we can write JSON dot and then create parser. Now that requires a stream, and of course we have a stream because we just created a stream there. And then once you've created a parser, we write a second dot and write now, is it parse? Is it get object? That looks like it. Okay, I hope this is correct. So I actually was using a different JSON parser until recently, so I don't know this one so well, but it does seem to be better than the Google JSON parser, at least for our purposes. Okay, so what I've done now is I have created a parser which reads this input stream, and then I've asked that parser to read an object. Now, an object in JSON basically means data between curly brackets, right? So you can see that this starts with curly brackets. So if I want to read everything in the curly brackets, then that means I'm reading an object. And pretty much every website is going to provide data to you using a JSON object if you're accessing an API. Okay, so now let's just check that everything is working. I'm going to try printing out the JSON value that we read. And of course I have to put this into the main window, and I'm going to do that in an action listener on the update button. So if I double click on the update button, so I went back to main window, I've gone to design, double click on the update button, and that has made an action listener. Now in the action listener, what I'm going to do is make a new instance of my converter class. So I'm going to say converter equals new converter. Okay, now when I do that, it is creating a new instance of converter. So this is the type, and it's storing it in the variable called converter with a small c. And when I create a new converter, it's going to run the program code in the constructor. So that means that this program code is going to be executed. Now this program code is hopefully going to access the URL, create a stream from the URL, read in the data as a JSON value, and then print out the data as a JSON value. So let's give it a try. If I run and then click on update, and oh dear, illegal state exception. Okay, doesn't look too good. Okay, I think I probably have used the incorrect command from the library. So I'm just going to scan through and see if I can... I should have used create reader, that's why. And now I can use read object. That's better. Okay, let's try that. Hopefully this is going to work. There we go. Okay, so sorry, I misled you slightly about what you needed to type there, but it should be JSON.createReader from the stream, and then afterwards read object. And once you've done that, then you're going to get some data that looks like this. Okay, so you can see that all of that data from the website has been read into our program. Now, because this has been read in using the JSON reader, that means that the data has actually been broken down and we can access individual parts of this data. So all of this data is measured relative to Bitcoin. You can see that Bitcoin has value of 1 because 1 Bitcoin is worth 1 Bitcoin. So let's say that I want to look up US dollar, because that's what was on my user interface label. Here it is. And US dollar has the code USD. So the first thing I'm going to do is get that value. Now USD is written in quotation marks because it's a string. Then we have a colon, and then we have curly brackets. And you might remember that curly brackets mean that this is also an object. So what we've got is actually an object, because there's the curly brackets. And inside the object we have some data called rates. And that rates data is another object because there's curly brackets. And then inside the rates data we have got another object called USD. And I can't find it now, but we saw it earlier on. So we have to get each of those objects out in order. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a JSON value. Rates equals, now instead of value, let's call this all data, because this is all of the data that I started with. Now what I'm going to do is all data dot get you know what? I think I should have put JSON object there and import that, and then that should allow me to right here all data dot get object. There we are. Get JSON object. Rates. So what I've done is I've read in an object, and of course that gives me a JSON object, and then from the object which contains all the data, I'm getting the object which contains the exchange rates. Now from the object that contains the exchange rates, I'm going to get the object which contains the US dollar rate. And let's just print out that object. So this should now give us just the information about the US dollar. And if I run that, click update, And okay, so I've got null here, which actually means that I've made a mistake somewhere in the information that I've got. So just to try to work out where I've gone wrong, let's comment that out and just go back one. So print out rates. Let's see if I get something here. Okay, that's fine. So I must have entered the wrong code for US dollar or something like that. I'm pretty sure it was USD, but let's page across and see if I can spot where it talks about the US dollar. It might be easier to look on the original browser. If I could do a search USD. Right, there's US dollar, and it is called USD, so what's gone wrong here? I know why. It's because I put all data dot get object, and what I should have done was put rates dot get object. Okay, let's try again. Okay, and now I've printed out rate, so I want to print out US dollar rate. Okay, there's the information about US dollar. Now, this is an object, and inside the object we can see that we have a value, and the value is what we're really interested in. So this is how many US dollars you would get for 1 Bitcoin at the moment. So in order to get that value, well, that's not an object anymore, that's going to be a number. So I write JSON number USD value equals USD rate dot get JSON number, and the name of that number is value, so I write value in here. Okay, so you can see that the basic pattern is that when we read the data, we had loads and loads of data, and then each of these lines is just gradually narrowing down the data that we're interested in. So this line gives me all of the data, and then this line just gives me the exchange rates from that data, and then this line just gives me the US dollar exchange rates, and then this line just gives me the actual numerical value of how many US dollars to a Bitcoin. So once I've read in all of that information, I want to be able to use that information in my program. So what I'm going to do is inside the class, I'm going to put USD per BTC, so US dollars per Bitcoin. And I'm going to store the current US dollar exchange rate, USD per BTC, equals USD value. Now that's a JSON number, but I want to double, so I write USD value dot, is it get double? Oh, double value, that's it. Okay, so that will read out the actual number that I'm interested in, which is that number there, and store it into that location. Now what I can do is just convert my Bitcoin to US dollars pretty easily. If I write here, for example, double BTC to USD, double BTC. So this is going to convert Bitcoin to US dollars. I provide it with a number of Bitcoin, and then I just return BTC times USD per BTC. So multiply by the exchange rate in order to get the number of US dollars. So now let's go back to my main window. And first of all, I'm just going to make it work for a single Bitcoin. So we'll do BTC label dot set text, and I'll just put 1 there because we're just doing 1 Bitcoin at the moment. And then I'm going to do USD label dot set text. Now this is where I need to get the number of US dollars. So I'm going to do double USD equals converter dot USD per BT. Sorry, no. What did I call it? US dollar to BTC, right? BTC to USD, sorry. So 1. Now that's going to give me the number of US dollars, and to print that on the label I have to convert that number into text. So I can do that using the double.toString command with US dollars to convert it to text. So let's just run that. So when we start off, obviously there's no values here, but if I click on update, then I get 1 Bitcoin equals 332,887.866 US dollars. Right? I don't even, okay. I'm just thinking about formatting that number, but okay, never mind. So that's fine. I think the next step would be to maybe replace this so that we could type a Bitcoin amount. I think I am going to do that in this video. It kind of feels incomplete if I don't do that. So I'll delete that Bitcoin amount and I'm going to write in a JSpinner instead. So let's put the JSpinner here. And I'll call that the BTC spinner. And now if I go back to the program, and instead of having a Bitcoin amount here, I'm going to read in the amount from the spinner. So I'll put double BTC equals BTC spinner dot, hold on, is it not called BTC? Oh, it's down here. Okay. So, guys, this is a problem I mentioned before. If you have a part of your user interface defined at the bottom, then you'll need to move your action listener code down so that it comes after the point where you created that user interface element. Okay, so BTC spinner dot get value. And because that value is going to be a number, now I think it probably does come out as a double. I'm actually going to chance it and see if this works. I don't know for sure, but I'm going to experiment, and if it doesn't work, then I'll have to change it back to the other method. So let's try typing in some BTC. What is 2 Bitcoins in US dollars? Okay, it didn't work. So it actually returned an integer. That's interesting. So I wonder if I can change the data type for this spinner. It looks like I can. It looks like if I click here, I can change the number type to return doubles and then click OK. So now I've changed that so that it's going to provide me with a double, and that should fix the problem, I think. So let's try putting 2 Bitcoin and click update. And there we go. So that gives us our value of US dollars. Now, another thing which is kind of annoying is the fact that the US dollars are formatted in such an ugly way. What we really want is a proper symbol and things like that. Now, there is a way to do that in Java. What you need is something called a number formatter. Or there's probably an easier way is to use a command which exists in Java. I think it was introduced with Java 9. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. And that is the string.format command. So what we can do with string.format is it's like this. So let's just put text equals string.format. Now, you can write a format using some standard codes, and these are basically the same codes that exist in some other programming languages like C. So if you know C, then this is going to be straightforward for you. So if I want to write, for example, a number with a decimal point, then I write %f. And that percentage basically means insert a number or insert a value, and then the F is for floating point value. Now I'll write my US dollars here, and then that text is what I want to put on the label. Now, as it is, this is just going to look the same as before, assuming I can write it without an error. But the advantage is that this gives us a lot more flexibility, because now I can, for example, specify that I only want 2 decimal places by putting 0.02 in front of the F, and it will only display 2 decimal places in my answer. If I put a dollar at the front, then that's going to give me dollars in my currency value. So that also looks a little bit better. Now, I think there's probably a way to insert a comma as well. I actually don't know how to do that. It's not something I've had to do before, but I'll maybe have a look on the internet later on. Okay, so guys, I hope that makes sense, that you can create your app like that. Now, another nice thing to do would be, rather than having to click the update button, if it just updated automatically. So I may as well show you how to do that as well. It's really easy to do. What you have to do is use a swing timer. So just write timer with a capital T, timer equals new timer. Now you need to specify a period in milliseconds. So let's say that we'll access the website every 2 seconds. So I'll put 2000. Now the second thing you need to provide is an action listener. So remember, we already know about action listeners from our work with buttons, right? We know that when you click on a button, you can attach an action listener to the button, and it's going to do something when you attach the when you click the button. It's going to do whatever you put in your action listener. Now we can also have an action listener connected to a timer, which means that it's going to do whatever program code you put in the action listener at those regular time intervals. So I'll just make a new action listener here. And I'm going to import the timer. Now make sure that you import the swing timer and not the util timer. Okay, so it's the one that says javax.swing. Okay, now in my action listener, I'm just going to take all of that code that was previously on the button, and I'm going to move it into the timer instead. And then I can actually delete the code which set the action listener on the button. Now for some reason it's complaining about text. Oh, sorry, that's because I'm missing the action performed. So what I should have done, before I pasted that in, I should have gone over action listener and chosen add unimplemented methods, and then paste it in the middle there. Okay, so that's fine. Now I want to do timer.start to actually start the timer. And this timer is now going to run every 2 seconds and access the website. Now I think 2 seconds is probably the minimum time you want before accesses, because you really don't want to spam the website with endless requests, right? And if you do, then the people who run the website could get annoyed with you. So please make sure that you choose a reasonable time period. I would actually normally go for something a bit longer. I think you could easily update every minute or something, or every 30 seconds. But just as a test, I'm going to put 2 seconds here so that we can make sure it works okay. So there we go. After 2 seconds, it updated. So if I put 10 Bitcoin, and then I've got to wait a little bit, and then hopefully it's going to update. There we go. This updates periodically every 2 seconds. Now I could also make sure that when I change the value in the Bitcoin field, it updates automatically. So I'm adding more and more to this video. I'm sorry if I've covered the main points, but I may as well add in these extra features. So what I'm going to do now is just create a separate method called update, and that's going to perform the update. And then, oh no, I've got to move the spinner and the label up. So okay, this was supposed to be a video on one topic, and now it's turning into just like a random hacking session. I'm sorry about this. USD label. Okay, so what I did there was I just moved the code which updates the label into a separate method. And in order to do that, I had to move those variables, BTC spinner and USD label, out of that method and into the class so that they could be shared between two different methods. Okay, so, and the reason I did that is so that I can do this, which is to say that BT spinner dot get model dot add change listener, new change listener, import change listener, add unimplemented methods, type update here. And it's basically just so that if you change the value inside the spinner, then it will update the number immediately without waiting 2 seconds. So I can now write 1 and it will, in theory. Oh, it's because I haven't pressed enter. There we go. And I can write 1 and press enter, and then it's going to update immediately rather than waiting 2 seconds. So you can see I'm just getting carried away with trying to add features to this program. Now, guys, in terms of how this program can be developed, I'm sure you've got lots of ideas. Obviously, you can have different currencies. You could have a facility to add currencies. We had a look earlier on at how to create a list and then select items in the list. So you could have a list of different currencies and then click on items in the list in order to view the exchange rate for that currency. So I think there's lots of scope to develop this in different ways. Also, of course, don't feel that you have to do a currency API. So like I said, there's loads and loads of different websites on the internet which offer APIs using the JSON data format. For example, Google provides a lot of their services as a JSON API. You might have to register in order to get an API key before you can actually use it. So that's things like Google Translate, Google Maps, and things like that. I know that now, if you want to use maps, also there's OpenStreetMap, and they don't require an account in order to access their map data. So that's that could be a good thing to try out. Other APIs out there, I think probably there are some maybe, I don't know, but I would guess maybe Project Gutenberg, which is the online library of different books, freely available books. They might provide an API which allows you to browse their library. I'm just going to check if that's the case. That's Gutenberg API. It looks like there are some APIs for it. It doesn't look like they're actual official Project Gutenberg APIs, but this looks like it provides an API for Gutenberg. So, and that's basically going to be like a library search through the texts available on Project Gutenberg. So, yeah, this is something where you can explore on the net, and there's so many different APIs out there that you can find. I expect there's one for Wikipedia as well. So I hope that gives you some ideas about not just things that you can try out, but also possibly avenues that you could explore for your internal assessment.